Yeah, why'd you start Trainual? What's the story here?
Maybe the better question is, how did you start Trainual? Because it sounds like the why came along a little bit later.
Yeah. So the why wasn't there from the beginning. The why presented itself once I saw a lot of businesses that were poorly run and talked to a ton of employees at those businesses. So right before Trainual, I had my consulting company, and part of what I was doing was I would go business to business and I would do these confidential interviews with all their employees just to like understand what's really happening here. And then I would summarize that all. I'd figure out the common denominators. I'd report it back to the owner, not with any specificity about who said what, but just like, here's the problems in your business. And I did over 2,000 of those interviews, 150 companies in 5 years. And that just ingrained in me this like, wow, most businesses are run really poorly. There's so many problems in business. What does a really organized business look like? What is the best business? And I think all of us get into business because we want to design the perfect company for us, a good lifestyle. We want to have a good culture. We want to have people that like going to work, that stick with us, that pursue this big mission. And it felt like everyone's doing a subpar job at this. And what would it look like to create this gold standard, like the Michelin star of businesses, the AAA 5-diamond of business, you know? And so that became what Trainual was all about, like the mission we were pursuing. But going back for me, my whole story started in high school as a first-time entrepreneur. I thought I wanted to be, have you ever heard of Ahmad Rashad?
Of course.
Like NBA inside stuff. You know, I grew up watching this guy on TV, which funny story.
I'm old. He used to play for the Vikings, I believe, as a wide receiver. That was his original.
Yeah, that's
his original career.
Sports.
Yeah. So I grew up watching this guy, and I was like, I want to be on TV as a broadcaster. And so when I was starting high school, I was 14, starting high school, we had this big field house, and it was like a career day sort of thing where they had all the activities that the school had, and they had a little film studio where they were looking for people to sign up and do film stuff. And I thought, this is my ticket to ESPN. Like, I'm starting now. Here we go. So I signed up for the little film club, and it just so happened that the guy that was doing the weekly on-air host thing, his co-host was graduating. They needed a new co-host. And so I volunteered for this spot. I found myself on this like kids television show, and our little show ended up airing on public access TV like 50 times a week.
Are there records of that show on YouTube?
I have videos. I don't know that it's on YouTube.
Well, what was it called?
Talkback.
Now, how old were you here?
So I was 14.
And was your idea then, did this feel more about creating, or did you have the word entrepreneurship, or were you thinking I'm going to start a company, or was this more about media and creativity and like being out in the world?
I think it was more that, but like I always had the little kid businesses. I had the landscaping and the really opportunistic, like I'd start a business for a day because I wanted something. Like there was this house in my neighborhood that it was like they kept building extensions onto this house. It looked really weird, but my friends and I would stand at the bus stop outside of this house and be like, how do we see the inside? And so that day I created a cleaning company so we could go to the front door and see the inside of this house. And so we show up with our buckets and our mops, and we're like, we're here to clean your house for $10. And they let us like clean.
I've heard worse reasons to start a company, by the way. That's not a bad... I like the hack there.
Yeah. And so like I started a car detailing company because my like neighbor had a Camaro, and I was like, I want to go in it. How do I do that? And so I was like, how do I get paid to do all the things I want to do? So I had like a fanny pack with like 11 business cards, and it was like, what business am I running today? So as a kid, I was always entrepreneurial, but I didn't know that word. And so in college or high school, it was more about the creativity. It was like, what can we do that gets people's attention, that's fun, and that's what our TV show became.
Oh, I love that. You can see that creativity flowing through in Trainual clearly.
Yeah.
Well, what else should we talk about Trainual before we talk about on the origin story of Trainual? Before we talk about, I want to talk about some of the secret sauce of Trainual. But when you thought about improving businesses, is Trainual today what you visualized, or has it evolved quite a bit since your kind of first iteration or first idea of what it was?
first iteration of Trainual was not to be a worldwide software. It was to, make $10,000 a month in recurring revenue so that I didn't have to worry about getting clients.
Yeah.
Like Trainual initially was trying to solve a cash flow problem. It was like, I'm getting new clients every month and I'm having to spend so much time with all of them. Recurring revenue or mailbox money or whatever was like the dream. I'd hear everybody talk about that. And so at the beginning, it was a solution to that problem. So it wasn't until a couple years into having Trainual, and should I patch together this whole story of how it all started?
Yeah.
All right. So let me fast forward through the video stuff. I had this little kids TV show, started getting notoriety around town where I grew up in Massachusetts, started getting asked to film weddings and bar mitzvahs and grandpa's anniversary party and that sort of thing, and realized I could make money doing this video. And so my friend and I, my co-host and I, we started a video production company. And at the beginning, it was weddings for $300 and parties for $100 and graduation montages for $75 and whatever we could charge for. But by the end of high school, we were doing the beauty pageants and the cheerleading tournaments and the soccer games and anything that was like in the vicinity of our school. And so when I went to college, we started taking on bigger events. I ended up buying my partner out. He was more the camera guy, and he went to work for NBC. And we started getting big regional tournaments. And so all over New England, I'm driving around New England, putting my friends in my car, renting a trailer, packing it with equipment to go do these live events. And little by little, we're like building a real business, going up and down the East Coast now. By the time I graduated, I set up an office in Boston and started hiring employees to do our fulfillment and shipping videos out everywhere. And so when I finished college, I thought I can do this across the country. Like there are so many events, and I knew there's NBC, there's ABC, there's like, why not the event video company, EVC? And so that's what I rebranded it as, was EVC. Let's make like a network for youth sporting events. And so my big plan...
Can you stop there?
Yeah.
Why did you choose to focus on youth sporting events at that point?
So at the beginning, when I did weddings, you would get a customer once, maybe twice if they got divorced, right? And you get paid once. Whereas like when we showed up and did an event venue, there would be thousands of kids, and you'd sell the same thing over and over and over again. So it was like really early recurring revenue almost.
What a great early lesson.
Yeah,
and then, you're not broadcasting. You're recording like this video, and then you're doing some sort of post-production work on it or something like that, and then selling it.
At the beginning,
like literally CDs.
At the beginning, it was VHS tapes.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And then it was video CDs, and then it was DVDs, and then it was HD DVDs and Blu-rays. But then in the later years, it was live streaming. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So,
Love it.
and we also got into this cool model where we would edit everything live. So it was no post-production. We stopped shipping things out. You would watch your kid's event, and then on your way out the door, you'd either be grabbing a disc that we would burn or a flash drive with the footage on it.
How did you figure out how to do that? Did you have a live van like at these events?
You'd think, but no, we just were scrappy, and we bought all the right equipment and we made it happen. And so it was like we're running cables, thousands of feet of cables around arenas into little black magic, like hardware video processing boxes, into a USB to a computer to ingest the footage live, and then converting the files while the next kid's going and dragging it onto flash drives, and a runner's taking it back to the table. And like, it was so much of it was like this complicated process. And so, but for a decade, that's what I grew up in, was this process-oriented business. And the video company, so much of it wasn't about creativity. It wasn't like we're producing these documentaries or anything. We're producing live footage. It's like, how quickly can we get this live footage into parents' hands as they walk out the door? They don't care that there's titles and animations and all that. They want to just take this home and show it in their living room.
They want to see their kid on the field. Yeah.
And so being able to get it 20 minutes later was much more important than getting a nicer, polished video 2 weeks later. And so all of it was process. And so as we grew the business, it was like, let's hire camera operators around the country. Let's take them through a training process of what it's like to work at our events. So we had online training, videos, checklists, quizzes. Like you had to get certified to work for us. And then when we would find a job in the area, we would blast it out to all the crew that we had in that area, and we would book the crew. And then we would ship equipment out with all of our kits, with all of our checklists, and they would send all the footage back. And so,
how did I not know this chapter in your story? That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but it was very fundamental to what Trainual is.
Yeah.
And so doing that for 12 years or something, it taught me the importance of systems and process. It taught me how to manage a remote business because we had hundreds of camera operators everywhere. We would do 5-10 events sometimes on the same day. And it taught me how quickly tech changes because we would be turning in cameras every 6 months to get new equipment.
Yep.
And we would be changing something in our process, our cables, our iPads, or something so frequently. And so after doing that business for so long, I that's what brought me out to Arizona. We can talk about that. Ended up opening 3 different offices, and I found myself here with no employees in Arizona, just kind of running the business remotely. And to find a sense of community, I started joining these entrepreneur groups and going to happy hours and seeing what other people were doing with their businesses. And in talking to other businesses, I saw I've got this kind of special talent, I think, for process and operations that a lot of entrepreneurs just don't have. And so that felt like something that I could help other people with. So around this time, I was a little burnt out with my video business. And I had my director of operations who's really ambitious. And he said he wanted to step into a bigger role. And so I decided to make him president and take myself off payroll. And I trained him on the last things that I did in the business over about 6 months until he could run the company. And I could just step back and be an owner. And that was also a key part of Trainual, because, handing off responsibilities and things. And so when he's running the business in this kind of like almost gap year, I call it, I started consulting and charging people for process and operations help. And that became my second company. A year later, I sold the video business and then focused full-time on consulting.
On that consulting business, were there some themes that you saw like that were recurring over and over? People were struggling with something about process that made the consulting business work?
Yeah. So that is what we started talking about early, where I would interview everybody and get those themes. And so one of the things I saw that was stood out so clearly is the job that people were hired to do, the responsibilities on their job description would morph so much over a year or two. And there seemed to be this big disconnect between what an employee thought they were there to do and what the employer expected of them. And so people felt like, well, I'm not appreciated. I'm not getting recognized for all this extra stuff I'm doing. They may not even know I'm doing this thing. And there seemed to be just this big gap between employee and employer. Culture and communication really stood out to me. Like a business owner would make a decision like, I don't know how to get everybody. I don't know what to do for bonuses at the end of the year. So instead, we're just going to hand out some gift cards in a company meeting. And then the employees would receive that as like, they're so cheap. They don't even care about us. Because there was no communication of like, what are our goals? What are we going after? What would you like as a reward that would feel good? And so I just saw this is really like a cultural communication responsibility breakdown, and all of that precedes process. Because if people know their role in a company, they know what they're there to do, they can have some level of autonomy without really thoroughly documented processes. And so that was a big lesson for me that, it's beyond just like your workflows, your checklists. You have to solve this like foundational stuff in your business of what do we all do here? Why are we here together? What makes this company special? That has to be strong before you then move into optimizing your workflows.
You said culture and communication precede process. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I love that.
And Chris, did you know that when you were running your video company, or was that more of an epiphany when you started your consultancy?
It was something I learned as the company went on. At the beginning, I of course didn't know that. I didn't set out at the beginning to like build an awesome culture. And in fact, when I was less and less involved in the video company, I would fly into events occasionally, and it would be like that. You remember that show, Undercover Boss?
Yes.
It was like that because we'd have these crews that maybe I've never worked with, And I would jump on a camera and then talk to them during the breaks. And they would say something like, can you believe that we're here for 10 hours and they don't even give us snacks or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, this is terrible, you know?
This owner sucks.
Yeah. So I was hearing that stuff and then I would go back and think, well, like, how do we update this for our next events? You know, like we did a ton of figure skating coverage and we started like giving people hand warmers and we started being like more thoughtful, but I wasn't that way at the beginning. And so I think it was just the experience of that. And so same with I don't know that I would have just developed this out of the gates with my consulting company if I didn't have the experience of those 150 other businesses and what they were doing wrong.
Wow. That's
like
good
the house
stuff.
cleaning business, which is so far my favorite.
The house cleaning, yeah. I had some good ones. I had like a merchandise, like a clothing line. I had when CD burners first came out, I had I think one of the earliest affiliate programs because I would ask people to bring their CDs on the bus, and then I would borrow them. I'd go burn copies of them, and then I would have this library of CDs I was selling, and 50% would go to the person that gave me the master, and 50% would go to me for burning it.
So did you always have spare cash as a kid because you're always running something?
Yeah, always.
Well, I love the entrepreneurial arc here. So phase one is 11 business cards in the fanny pack, random youth businesses to content and sporting events business to consulting business, and then the fourth iteration here fourth act is Trainual.
Yes.
All right. Well, I want to hear about it.
Yeah. All right. So I was doing this consulting for a couple years, and when I would work with somebody, I would package everything together, and kind of the handoff, the deliverable at the end was all of your roles and responsibilities, some flow charts of your processes, the like an org chart. It was like I was giving people their operations manual. And so much of what they were having me come in to do was that the name of the business was Organized Chaos. And so my flagship project was called the Organized Chaos Project. So I would come in, I'd collect all that stuff, and then I'd deliver them a really organized packet of here's how your business works. And people liked that. And so I thought, instead of delivering Dropbox folders and YouTube videos, what if I had some tool that was proprietary for my business? Maybe that would add some value for my consulting business. And so I started up the Trainual as this little software. It actually started as me seeing this prototype software that some ASU kids were working on. I don't know have we talked about this?
I don't think so.
All right, so I was volunteering at the Edson program at ASU.
Yep.
They had these pitch nights where the students would show off things that were part of their projects, and a couple students had this little tool that was for like hospitals to onboard new nurses or something like that. And I remember seeing this and thinking like, oh, I love the process nature of this. It's very sequential. It makes a lot of sense to me. Fast forward 6 months or so, I was working with a client on Mill Ave in Tempe that had a t-shirt shop, a custom t-shirt shop. And they would hire students from the university, and every semester, their workforce turned over 100% because they're students. And so they're constantly having to show the students how to use the printing press to make a t-shirt, how to use the graphic design system, how to process an order. And they had a 60-page Google Doc as their like training thing. And so I thought, well, I wonder if those kids, if their tool would work for training ASU students to do t-shirt printing. And so I reached out to them and they said, oh yeah, that was like a school project and we're just, we're moving on. We're graduating, we're shutting down. Long story, like side note, they ended up, these kids going to Y Combinator, building a separate business, raising a Series A, raising a Series B, selling the company. Like they did incredible.
Oh, wow.
So I had this little prototype of their software and I asked them, well, like, if you're not using it, can I have it? And they said, we put a lot of hours into this. Can we sell it to you? And so I offered them $3,000 for their student project, and they said yes. And so they sold me their little student project for $3,000. Now this thing was broken. It was pretty bad, but I found a developer, and I said, I've got another $7,000. I want to be $10,000 all in. I've got another $7,000 if you can turn this into the little small business tool that I'm envisioning. And so I downloaded some free mock-up software. I put together the screens of what I wanted it to look like, and the developer did it for $7,000. And so $10,000 all in, I've got this little tool that my t-shirt shop client used, and then a printing shop client used, a printing broker, and then the electrician, and then the next client, and it slowly started building up.
At this point, did you think, hey, this is part of the organized chaos?
Yes.
This is like a tech-enabled service more than I'm going to sell this software. Is that what you were thinking at the time? Yeah.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I thought this is just going to be part of the
Part of the
value
service.
of working with me. But then I thought, well, I could build up some recurring revenue from the consulting clients once I finish. So they'd get it for free for 6 months, and while they're working with me, and 6 months after, and then it kicks in that they have to start paying $49 a month. And so I thought, like, oh, if I'm building this consulting business, after a while I could have like 100 people paying me for this thing, and like, imagine how sweet that would be. And so that was the plan. It was like, let me build up this recurring base. And so at one point I did try to launch it as a software company. I caught the SaaS bug, and I thought I could be a software mogul. Like, let's try this.
Yeah.
And so I read this book about doing big campaign launches. I had my list, my drip sequence ready to go. I shot a series of videos, and I offered a lifetime license to Trainual for $997. And I sold 3, and they were to my 3 clients. So then I closed the chapter on the being a software mogul, and I went back to consulting.
This was like maybe 2015, 16?
Yeah, January 2015.
Okay.
But you were still selling the software to clients at this
To
point.
clients, yeah.
How did you figure out the price point? Did you ask them, what would you pay for this? Or did you just throw a dart, $49 a month?
Yeah, that's how much Basecamp cost. And I was like,
Yeah.
so that's how much I cost
Perfect.
too. Yeah.
So you're building up these customers over time. And then at what point did you actually get to that? Like, oh, I've got this recurring revenue. It solved my income gap. I'm good. Should I go for it again?
Yeah, it was a conversation with my wife that I remember we passed $2,000 a month in recurring revenue. And I remember just telling her one time at dinner, like, hey, Trainual is like covering our mortgage payment. Isn't that cool? And she was like, why aren't you doing more with that? Like, could it be more? Could it do something more? And so we started having this conversation that, like, what is the potential of this thing? And so a few things happen at once here. So the first thing was, in my consulting company, another thing I started doing was taking equity in a handful of other businesses. They couldn't afford the consulting services, but they would be willing to give me some kind of profit share or some kind of equity. And so one company locally that did this was Design Pickle, Russ Perry.
Love Russ.
Yeah. And so Russ was a good friend of mine. He was starting this thing. It was like him and a VA in the Philippines at the time. And he's processing all of Design Pickle's orders through Gmail, an open Gmail account that if you knew the email address, you could get unlimited free design work. And that was his system. And so he asked me, can you come in and build like a real system? And so we did like a little equity deal. And over like the last year or so, that had worked out so well. His business had grown so much. And so I loved that model. I was excited about that model. And so when I had a client cycle off, I started thinking, well, let me find another one of these equity projects. And I didn't have one lined up. And so I asked my team, why don't we treat Trainual like it's one of those equity projects? Like, well, let's put our effort into Trainual like they're a consulting client of ours and see how we would rebuild it. So that was one thing that happened. The other thing that happened is I wrote this little book called 100 Hacks to Improve Your Business. And I was sending this book out to people as like a lead magnet. I had started shooting some videos. I was getting on some podcasts. I had an email list that had maybe 2,000 people on it. And I saw that there was like this beginning of an audience that was interested in the work I was doing. And I thought, is my down funnel monetization thing consulting? Or could I have a bigger success with something like software that you could sell a lot higher volume of? And so that was going through my head. And then the third thing is I thought I was going to grow my consulting business like I did with my video company by finding consultants in other markets. And so I found one in Reno and one in Austin. and I was teaching them my consulting model, and I was training them with Trainual. And so this like convergence of, thinking like, let's treat Trainual like our own client. My wife saying, hey, what are you doing with that thing? Training the consultants, realizing there was this audience. It made me think, what do I have to lose? Like, let me just go for it and let's try the software thing. And so I sat down with the 4 other people at my company around a table not much bigger than this. I got a new logo for Trainual designed on Fiverr.
And you already had the Trainual name.
Yeah,
You
had
already-
the
yep,
name.
Yep.
But I got a new logo designed, the like scripty one that we
love
have
it.
today. And I came in with t-shirts and I was like, hey, I think we should give Trainual a real try. And so we got everyone to agree that for 6 months, we were going to go all in on Trainual. And if it didn't work, we'd go back to consulting, because I wanted them to know that your jobs are not at risk. You're all still, they were all like full salary kind of employees, and they all went for it. And so that was December of 2017, and we planned to launch in January 2018.
So that was kind of like V2 when you were launching, right?
Yeah.
And what was different about that launch from the first $997 lifetime value launch?
I had more of an audience. I had people to launch it to. So what we did in December is we took the old Trainual website down, replaced it with a landing page where you could sign up for, it was like a little call to action that said, like, you want a turnkey business, or, could your business run without you, or something like that. And so it was an email sign up to get on the wait list for when we launched. And then we hired this may sound crazy or vain or something, but we hired a photographer for a few-month contract to produce content of us starting this thing up. And so I started writing tons of blog posts and posting on Instagram all the time, and was trying to get the word out that we're now doing a software, and people were getting excited about it.
Was there one thing, when you think about, you started building this audience early, if you could pinpoint like one thing, what was the thing that was resonating with your early customers? Like if you could pinpoint one word, is it process? I mean, you keep using the word process, but do business owners just experience a lot of chaos? Like what was the essence of what, like people just like, I need that thing that Chris and team have built?
Yeah, it was organized chaos. Like that was the thing about, I would tell people the name of my consulting business, and they'd be like, "You're hired."
It immediately meant something
Yeah.
to them.
It was like, no, I know my business is just like overwhelming, and it's stressful, and there's so much happening, and I can't wrap my arms around it all. And when I was coming in and meeting them for coffee and saying like, "Oh, I can fix that. Like I can make your business organized so that you can work there if you want to," they were like, sold. Like that sounds great.
It's not the absence of chaos in company building. It's just got to be organized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Disciplined.
Yeah. Chaos in business is a really good thing.
Right.
I would always tell people, if you don't have any chaos, you have no opportunity.
It's boring.
Yeah. The chaos is all the opportunity. It's the ideation. It's the excitement. It's the people that are coming to you with their concerns and thoughts and improvements, and like that's what overwhelms us. But if you can wrap your arms around all of that, and you have a plan for what you're trying to build, and you are organized with your approach, then you can build an awesome business. And so, that idea of organizing your operations, of, I've got something that customers want, but I can't get myself out of it. I'm either the linchpin and I have to do all the work myself, or I've tried hiring people and that never works out. That's what people are experiencing, is like there's this ceiling on how big their companies can grow. And I felt like, well, I can help you with that. And this software can help you with that. And so people are excited. What I didn't anticipate is that it is way easier to sell consulting than it is to sell software.
Before we go into that, can I take you back to the time where that meeting where you said to your 4 employees, let's go for it? What was their first reaction?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They were just like, I'm in?
Well, maybe it was more like, okay. But yeah, the concern was, if we're going to stop the consulting revenue, can you still pay our salaries? And that's where I committed. I was like, we're good. I can pay everybody's salaries for the next 6 months. And if we get near the end of that line and things aren't going well, we'll go back to consulting.
You created psychological safety for the team, and you probably had, it was a small team with tight culture,
Yeah.
and you created psychological safety. I mean, those are pretty important kind of underpinnings to any successful endeavor, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How confident did you feel? The Phoenix Founders Podcast is sponsored by Arizona Venture Development Corp.,